kind of detailing out the performance of the city over the last fiscal year. And then some accounting standards or new accounting requirements that are going to be coming out over the next couple of years. And then finally at the end, just a couple of summary slides at the end. So as we get going here, the city is going to receive an unmodified or a clean audit opinion. That's the highest level of assurance that an auditor can provide any entity, so that is very positive results there. The city is receiving one significant deficiency. It's similar to what we've done had in the past, just related to segregation of duties. There's just naturally in a smaller entity, there's just limited segregation of duties that can happen with given the constraints of the budget. So that's very similar to what we've had in the past. And then this year we did have 3 Minnesota legal compliance items that we identified. And what they consist of is, one was the broker certification. So each year the city is supposed to obtain a broker certification. So what that is that's a signed agreement from any investment brokers that the city uses that says they're going to comply with Minnesota statutes and any further constraints that the city's investment policy might have. You're supposed to obtain one of those before any transactions occur during the year. There was one that was missed in 2018. It has been already obtained for 2019, so that one should go away. Mark, if you want to scroll, we're on page 3. Right here, okay. We also had 2 of our disbursements that we tested were outside of the 35 days as required by Minnesota statute. And really what that comes down to, and we've talked about this, is that there's a few vendors that are not necessarily real timely with providing invoices to the city, but they date their invoices when the service was performed. So the key to that one, as we've been talking, is to make sure that they're getting stamped received when the invoices are actually being received at City Hall. So I think that one should easily go away. And I'm talking with Mark and Sue, as they already have a stamp and they're already stamping invoices. So that one should be taken care of for this year. And then also we had one contract that we looked at where the contractor's withholding affidavit was not received before final payment was made to that vendor. And what that is that's a affidavit that contractors are supposed to provide to the city that says they've complied with all of the various Minnesota statutes and withholding requirements for any of their employees. So that's really just a cleanup thing, just to make sure that that's obtained before final payment's released. As far as required communications, the entire council does have an actual letter that details all of this out, but just a few of the higher level items in that letter is that it's a reminder that an audit provides reasonable but not absolute assurance as to the financial statements. It also details and lets you know if there's any significant changes in standards this year. There were 2 new standards that we adopted as part of the audit process this year, but there was no significant effect on the city. So we just wanted to point them out. Statement 75 just relates to post-employment benefits, and then 89 relates to accounting for interest during the construction period of projects in like water, sewer, electric, so in your enterprise fund. Neither of those had any effect on the city, so pretty easy to account for it there. We didn't have any material audit adjustments this year, and we didn't have any disagreements with or difficulties with management as we performed the audit. So as we go through the next several slides here, the first set is going to be dealing with the revenues of the governmental funds. So if you want to go up one more slide. So this is just to kind of give you a 6-year trend of where the property tax levy has been for the city. And as you can see, starting in 2014 and it's continued since, there is a small portion of the levy that is related to the sewer PFA loan that's out there as well. But the combined levy is about $888,000, roughly $887,000, and it equates to about 45% of your total revenues in your governmental funds. So your governmental funds are your general fund, the debt service funds, the special revenue funds, any of those types of funds. And then the city also does receive a very small market value credit, and it's so small you don't even really see the line on there because it's only about $1,200. The city also has one tax increment financing district in place currently. As you can see, it's been very consistent over the last 6 years at just over $19,000 in tax increment. So This next one is looking at the local government aid that the city receives. So in 2018, the city received about $562,000 in local government aid. It's all based on formulas at the state level. There's also, was just under $17,000 in additional aid for small city assistance this last year. And your local government aid represents about 30% of your total governmental fund revenue. So when you look at your local government aid and your property taxes, that's about 75% of your total revenues in your governmental fund. So it's a very significant portion. And this just gives you that combined picture. So this year it was just under $1.4 million for between taxes and local government aid. This next one just gives you a 6-year trend as far as where are the significant buckets of money coming from for the city's governmental funds. As you can see, property taxes, your local government aid, those are your significant ones. Charges for services, that's also your next significant one, but you can kind of see how those have trended over the last 6 years. Those same 3 significant areas have been your 3 largest areas for some time now. Then the next set of slides are going to be looking at the expenditure side of the governmental funds. So this first one, looking at just general government functions. So this is going to be, as it mentions on there, it's the mayor, the council, the elections, administration, finance, legal, planning, zoning, and municipal building there. So expenditures this year compared to last year were just over $4,000 more, so pretty much flat is what we'd like to say. There's just a small increase in engineering costs and some employee benefits related to insurance, but that was offset by a decrease in salary expenses last year. So, but very consistent as far as 2017 to 18. On this one, we're looking at the public safety. So this is the police department, fire department, and first responders. As you can see, for 2018, police accounted for about $375,000. Fire was $53,000, and first responders was about $3,800. And it's been pretty consistent. You will see the fire, so that red spot in the center, that is down this year. But really what that relates to is the timing of the fire aid that you received from the state of Minnesota for the fire relief. So due to the timing of when that audit was completed, that wasn't received until I think March of 2019 this year. So that's not reflected in there this year. So that's why that red block in the center is down. Looking here again at the public safety expenditures, so it's comparing the expenditures for each of the 3 areas in public safety, but then also has some direct revenues associated with it, so we're excluding the tax levy. So you can see the police, there is a small portion that goes with that. That's going to be related to fines and forfeits and a few things like that. For fire, you'll see that there are revenues associated with that, and that's mainly your fire contract and some fire suppression. And then the first responders also have a very small portion there. But you can see also, again, the difference in the revenue side as well as your revenues are down because you're missing the fire aid revenue as well that comes from the state issue. Public Works is the next one. So this is going to be including any salaries, benefits, repairs, maintenance, supplies, fuels, everything that goes into your Public Works function. As you can see, this year their total expenditures were $282,000. It's an increase of $43,000 or just over $43,000, mainly just all related to street maintenance. So that's really going to ebb and flow based on what kind of projects are going on in the city each year. So next one, looking at the sanitation and recycling. These the costs in this function basically just represent the contract that the city has to provide those services. So you expect each year it's going to be pretty close to break even any given year. It's just going to be the timing of when those payments are due, basically, when you bill it out to customers and when you have to cut that check to the vendor. So it's very consistent year over year. Culture and recreation, this is kind of the next big one. So this one's going to include anything in the recreation programs, parks, swimming pool, the library, and the Gunderson House. Total expenditures this year were $313,000. It was an increase of just under $23,000. And really, the majority of that's just an increase in personnel costs between the parks, the library, and the pool. Looking specifically at the library here, So you can see this is going to include anything related to salaries, benefits, your books, the supplies, insurance, utilities, printing costs, anything like that that goes into the operation of the library. Expenditures this year were $185,000 or just over that, and it was an increase of about $16,000, of which the majority of it was related to your increase in personnel costs. So there are some specific revenues that are generated or geared specifically towards the library. There is some property tax levy. It's about $143,000 or just under that. And then the city also receives county aid for the library as well of just over $38,000. And then there's the small purple block at the top of each of those lines are basically just some other miscellaneous revenues that you get, like printing and copying and a few other things like that. This next one's looking at economic development. The big piece here is it was $114,000. It's an increase of $54,000. Really what this relates to is there's some increased costs regarding the engineering for the industrial park, but then the land that's in the industrial park, we have to mark that to market each year. So this year there was a slight reduction in that, so we had to reflect that as additional expenditures this year. So that was kind of the big driver as to why that cost increased there. And then here's the kind of the big picture of your governmental fund expenditures, looking at all of the different functions year after year. So your general government, your public safety, your public works, and then culture and rec are your four predominant functions where you have the majority of the cost for the city. Looking at the actual general fund budget to actual expenditures, so your general fund expenditures were over budget by just under $56,000 this year. And it kind of came out in two different areas. Municipal building, just general expenditures related to that, so maintenance, upkeep, and then also some additional personnel expenditures this year. And that's within general government. Within public safety, another area, there was similar things, repairs, maintenance, personnel, and some additional supply costs this year. So those were your two bigger drivers in why the general fund is over budget on the expenditures. So then all of the other funds of the city, basically your fire fund expenditures, they were under budget by about $38,000. Partially, some of it was related to supplies, so the timing of when some purchases, and then here's where that state fire aid payment to the Relief Association also shows up again as well. That's about a $26,000 payment each year. And then library expenditures, they were also over budget this year, but just barely, about $1,000. So looking at the reserves for the governmental funds, so this first one is looking at the percentage of fund balance that's in the general fund based on the far right-hand column is comparing that to the 2019 budget, so you can kind of see where your reserves are at compared to your budget. It was about 60%, and for 2018 it was about 61%. So you can see over the last now probably 4 years, going into the 5th year with 2019, you've been slowly starting to bring that fund balance down a little bit. So you've got plenty of fund balance reserves in there. I would consider that healthy, and it's not out of line with what the state auditor's office would recommend for there. And really, with the state auditor office, what they recommend is you get to that idea where if everything goes completely wrong, you have at least enough reserves in your general fund to make it to your first tax settlement, which doesn't come till about 6 months through the year. So that's kind of where they get their baseline for that. Also looking at the library fund, so the fund balance in the library fund at the end of the year was just under $54,000. It accounts for about 30% of the expenditures in that fund. And you can see it was basically about break even in that fund. So you're about 29%, so you're probably on the low side in that one a little bit, but not drastically by any means. Kind of with the idea that they also rely heavily on your property tax levy as well. So it'd be nice to see that up a little bit, but it's not real concerning at this point yet. The fire fund, here's where you're going to see that red line for the percentage of fund balance, and you can see this year it took a big jump this year, but again, that's going to be relating to the timing of that fire aid payment again. So you can see that kind of rears its head in here a few times just based on the timing of that. So if we were to factor that fire aid payment in as if it had been received in 18, it's going to be back in line with that 34-35%. So you're in line with this, it's a 1 year blip because of that fire aid payment. Then on there, I also mentioned just the capital improvement fund, there's also about $210,000 that's set aside, so that's not reflected in here. That's set aside in a separate fund for other projects and equipment. The Economic Development Authority, so the fund balance here is about $148,000. This last year it had a loss of about $28,000. And a lot of that's going to be just timing of when things happen. So it's going to be the timing of when costs come in for various projects. The big thing is there's still about $81,000 in the advance from KMU that started during 2016. That's down about $10,000, so the fund's continuing to make payments on the industrial park startup loan that they got from KMU, so it's good to see that. There was $236,000 of land that was held for resale in that fund in 2017. It was when that was purchased, and it had a current market value of about $223,000, so that's also affecting the expenditures because we had to mark that down as well, so we marked it down about $13,000. Looking now at the debt service for the city, there's a lot of information going on here, but we tried to summarize. You can see each of the bonds here over the last 6 years. You can see you're continuing to pay down those older bonds, which is very typical. On the second column from the right there, you'll see the fire hall refunding. You'll see that big purple one was the temporary funding that the city received. And then in 2017, when that bond actually got put into permanent debt, that's where you see that big drop in there because the city didn't use all of that temporary loan. So you only had to bond what you needed for that. So. And then on this one, we also have a few other miscellaneous debt type items that we have. So this is where we're reflecting all of the different advances that KMU has provided. To the EDA, the liquor fund, you can see there's a capital lease for the fire truck, there's a Vector truck out there. And then the big one in the center there, that's the net pension liability. We included it on here, but it's a liability that's outside of your control. That's the liability where your only requirement is to make the statutory contributions for para. Anything outside of that is on the plan itself to try to get it back to a fully funded status. But you can see in 2018 it did take another drop. Really that's going to be a reflection of the pension plan had a pretty good year on investments for the 2018 year. So that's going to be your biggest driver in there. The spike in 16 was because that was the year that they reassessed a bunch of assumptions that they were using in determining that liability. On this next one, this is just the next 10 years worth of debt service requirements. This assumes no new debt is out there. So it just kind of gives you a picture of where those debt service payments are going to be at. The red block on the top is going to be your business type, so that's going to be your water, sewer, electric, liquor, anything that would be classified as business type. And then governmental is the blue block on the bottom. Looking at some capital projects now, so this is where you're going to see, if you go to the next slide, at the end of 2018, the city had about $834,000 in fund balance in the capital projects fund. And the majority of that's committed to other things. So you have $210,000 for fire projects, streets has $271,000, general government has $136,000, and then there's various other miscellaneous commitments in there too, about $120,000. So that just kind of goes to show where you're saving up for some of those future projects in here and how much is set aside. So the next group of slides now is going to be looking at the operational trends for the utility funds. The first one, looking at the water fund. On here we say the water service is fully supported by ratepayers, which means after we calculate in depreciation, everything like that, you still have profit in the fund. So that's good to see. It kind of comes down to, are your current users paying for the system, or what's the city's philosophy on that? So it's good to see that. The net income before any of the pension entries was just over $18,000, and when we actually factored in the pension information this year, you would have had almost another $2,000 in net income. So instead of $18,000, it would have been $20,000. So that's where, since we had that reduction in the liability of the plan this year, that manifests itself as actually a reduction in expenses for the city. And then the last rate increase was in 2015 for the water fund. And then this is just a comparison of what the cash reserves is for the water fund compared to what the outstanding bonds are. As you can see, your cash reserves are about $550,000 compared to about $150,000 of outstanding debt. Or $140,000 it says. The sewer fund, this year you'll see it's primarily supported, but it's not fully supported this year. So net operating revenues include a levy of about $60,000 for the PFA bond. There's also about $37,000 worth of assessments in there. And the effects of the net income before the pension entry was actually a reduction. It was actually a loss of about $36,000. There was a 20% rate increase in 2018, so that is going to take a little bit to catch up. But when you look at this, if you still kind of factor in what's the depreciation and how does that factor in there, the depreciation is going to be the largest reason as to why you have a loss in this fund. So the depreciation is the green bar there, and you can see that's a pretty significant number. So you're covering a portion of it, just not all of it. So nothing real concerning there, just because it's not like you're not covering any of it. So it is good to see that. And then similar to the water fund, here's a comparison of what the cash in the sewer fund compared to the bonds outstanding. There's bonds outstanding of about $1.775 million roughly compared to cash of just over $1 million. So again, it gives you that picture of what's outstanding. In the electric fund, this one is supported by ratepayers as well, so that means you're fully covering your depreciation. The net income before any transfers and any effect of the pension entries was about $280,000 this last year. There was also transfers of about $67,000 during the year too, which is to help offset levy and that type of stuff as well. There were some updates to the rates during 2018, but it didn't really affect a real significant change in net rates. It was an adjustment to the monthly charges, and then the base rate changed as well. But it wasn't a real significant effect. And then the pension effect would have actually added to your net bottom line by almost $6,000 this year. And then in the electric fund, you have very little outstanding for debt, just a small $17,400 compared to what your cash reserves are, just over $2.5 million this year. Looking at the liquor fund, so kind of a couple different ways to look at the liquor fund. We have another slide a little bit later looking at gross profit, but so we had net income of just under $30,000 this year. That's before transfers and before any of the pension effects that are out there. But the second bullet is the one I like to look at when a city is operating a liquor operation. Are you able to transfer any money out of it to help, whether it's projects, the general fund, whatever that may be? As you can see now, for several years now, the last 4, the city's been able to transfer $20,000 out to other funds. So it's very good to see that. In my opinion, that's kind of the goal of the liquor fund, is you're using it to fund other operations, so you're profitable. The other nice thing to see is that since you are profitable, you don't have to worry about the Minnesota statute out there regarding if liquor operations have deficits, 2 of 3 years, you have to hold public hearings and go through a bunch of other hoops there, but that's not a concern here because you've been positive for several years now. Then as I mentioned, we also like to look at it as kind of what's the gross profit percentage, and you can look at this a couple of different ways. It makes it a little bit tougher when you have both on and off sale liquor, because the information that we receive from the state of Minnesota doesn't really break down how big the operations are when you look at just on sale or just off sale. They just give us a combined report that says if a city has both on and off sale, here's what their average gross profit is. So for the city, it's about 35% for 2018. So it shows a slight decrease, but it's still 35% for both 17 and 18. But when you look at other cities, it was 40%. But as I mentioned, it's really hard to compare about that because we don't have a good breakdown between what's the portion of on sale versus the off sale. On sale is going to be, of course, a lot higher percentage, and off sale is usually going to be a little bit lower. And then there is cash reserves in the liquor fund as well. The liquor fund also owes the electric, so Kenyon about $37,000, but you're continuing to make repayments on that advance as well. So you have You add it to the cash reserves while also paying off the advance, so that's always good to see. And then for the storm sewer fund, so this one, it is currently being supported by ratepayers. There were losses in 2015 and 16, but starting in 17, that turned back positive. Had positive net income of just under $8,000 before the pension effects. And really what that is there have been some adjustments to the rate increases. So in 2017, the city adjusted rates in the storm sewer fund, and that's really, it accomplished its goal of getting that back into the black for that one. And there was depreciation of about $30,000 in there. As you can see, that is the majority of your expenses in the storm sewer fund. And then looking at just the cash reserves compared to any outstanding bonds. Outstanding bonds this year just under $86,000 compared to cash of just over $500,000 this year. So that kind of takes it through some of the graphs that we had related to any of the financial operations for the city over the last fiscal year. Coming up, there are some additional standards that we just wanted to point out. First one, Statement 83, deals with asset retirement obligations. We're not expecting any real significant impact on the city for that one. It encompasses, similar to governments that run landfills, they have to report a liability because they have to monitor that when they close that landfill. This is a standard that brings in a bunch of other different types of assets that governments could potentially have. I think some of the real out there type things like large governments that operate nuclear reactors for energy, those types of things. So that's bringing into the equation those types of assets, but no concerns there at all. Statement 84, fiduciary activities, is also going to be applicable for 2019. Not expecting a real significant impact on that one. And then finally, the next big one that's kind of out there for governments that they've been eyeing is the one starting for December 31st, 2020, and that's bringing in leases. So that's going to completely change the way governments have to account for leases. And really the battle with that one is just making sure that there's a good kind of inventory of the leases that the city has. So that's both your expenditure-driven leases, so if you're leasing vehicles or equipment or copy machines, postage machines, but it also factors into it the revenue side. So if you're leasing space or you're leasing spots on a water tower for cell phone antennas, that kind of brings into that whole equation different things that we at least have to contemplate as to whether we need to record those now. So, kind of just in conclusion, general fund, you're healthy. You got just over 7 months worth of expenditures in your reserves, which is good. Overall, the enterprise funds, they are profitable. The liquor fund, positive net income after cash flows of transferring out, paying down the electric advance, everything out there, so it's very good. You had positive fund balance in all of your funds, so that's also very positive. This year, the capital projects fund, you did sell a tractor this last year, so that added to about $100,000 that you were able to use and put into reserves. And there's also capital outlay expenditures of $150,000, and that kind of where you see some of those increased repairs and maintenance and those types of things. It was going towards Centennial Drive, new furnace, AC at City Hall, public works pickup. That's where some of those dollars are getting spent. And then overall in 2018, the effect of the pension entries that we have to do to account for all of that ended up in just over a $5,000 decrease in expenses, so it actually reduced your overall expenses. So at that time, I'm open to any questions or anything like that that any members of the council may have.
This is my second time through this. I burned up all my questions.
A lot of figures.
Do you have any questions about these figures?
I did notice, looks like we need a code of ethics and a whistleblower policy.
Yeah, those are just best practices.
Yep.
So just kind of any governments would kind of recommend that those are nice policies to have. It should serve to actually protect members of the council and other key employees at the staff. It's always good to have those in place. That's just more of a best practice.
So Chris, along the lines of that, I started looking at, working on a code of ethics.
Okay.
And I was gonna ask you, last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, but I just thought of it again now, I was gonna email you, but do you guys have any examples of?
Yep, let me make a note, I can easily send you an example or two.
I need a more open-ended one that's not like, most of the ones that I've found are ones that have like a commission, like Rochester,
Okay,
Bloomington, places like that, and then that's not what we would, that's not something we would have here. We wouldn't have a separate, commission, an ethics commission. We would
Yep.
just have a policy that is pretty broad.
I'll get you some and I'll email over to
Okay,
you.
sounds good. Thank you.
And it looks like we need to do better spot check reports of the liquor store inventory.
Well, I don't know, Chris, if you want to explain that. I don't think it's a matter of doing the spot checks. I think it's some word initial.
Retaining the information.
Yep, so when those spot checks are being done, as auditors, we kind of go off the idea of if we can't see that it happened,
Yep.
it's hard to prove it, so that's kind of taking responsibility for something that's already being done. So it's initial date when the spot checks are being done, and then unfortunately in today's age, we still need to be able to verify that, see that, so whether it can be saved in paper or scanned in and saved digitally, so you're not having to stockpile a bunch of paper, that's what that comes down to. It's more of just taking, or basically just taking responsibility initially for those types of things, and, actually kind of going off that idea of, it's hard to prove it if we don't see it.
And that shouldn't be that difficult if they're doing the spot check. It's a matter of just signing and dating it, putting it in the file.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, that should be done.
Yep.
I agree.
It's not like them were being done, it's just they have to be maybe a little more thorough, but they have to be initial.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Documented.
Paper trail.
Because I'd be more concerned if I had heard that, well, you didn't do one for 2 months, or, but exactly.
That has been the case in the distant past.
Well, there used to be an emphasis on the annual inventory, and now the emphasis is more on spot checks every couple months, or, every 8 weeks, or however, which I think is better. We did the inventory last year, and I don't know, Chris, if that's something that we're gonna do again, or if you guys are recommending we do it again the same way this year, the year-end inventory, but there's more of a industry-wide, if that's the right way to put it, with municipals to do these spot checks instead of the one lump sum thing at the end of the year, which I think makes more sense, because that way you're going in every 2 months instead of once a year. So,
That is kind of the trend that we're seeing in a lot of our municipal operations that we see, is it's that, it kind of goes the idea, it's a perpetual inventory system. So at any given time, if the inventory is being recorded into the system properly, and as purchases are being made, if they're being scanned out, you should be able to go in and do those random spot checks any given time, and you should be able to verify those counts.
If this is something that's new, going in basically, was Matt aware of this, that he needed to
Yes.
sign it, or is it just something that was overlooked?
well, he was aware of it after this year, after they were done with their audit. But we talked about the spot checks, and, basically when I found out that they weren't all signed or initialed, then I told him, he knew that wasn't correct, so it's kind of like just something he missed or whatever a few times. But we've talked to him about it, and we talked to him after they were done with the audit about it, and I showed him where it was in the findings or in the recommendations, so.
We've
Yeah,
been
we've
talking
talked
about spot checks for the last 10 years at least.
Well, he's been
Every
doing
year.
spot checks.
Pardon?
He's done them before this year.
But never any reports. We were supposed to get a report every month of the spot checks. And a spot check only takes 20 minutes, half an hour at most, once a week.
Well, we talked about it, maybe
How
it was
do you
3
have-
years ago.
Most of our monthly checks every month are for the liquor store. And yet we don't keep any track of,
Well, we do keep track. Sue goes through them after he does them, and this has been going on for a few years. I don't know in other years if they were all initialed or not. I'd have to go back and look. But this started after, well, you're on the liquor committee, but remember it started after, maybe it was in 15 or 16. And then he started doing them. This started with Smith Schaefer. You know, they had brought this up also, and it was like bi-monthly, every other month. So that's what he's supposed to be doing, is doing these things every other month. So I don't know if this is an issue just this year, because I don't think it's come up in other audits that, you know,
I just
it's
come
come
back
up
and
in
look at those.
every audit.
know that they weren't initialed.
No, that inventory needed to be taken.
Well, they are taking inventory.
Okay, where are the reports? Because
Sue's
that was
got
the other
'em.
thing that came up, was that every month we would be seeing a report on what the inventory was. Because how can you tell what your profit and loss is without seeing your inventory report? Because that's primarily what your money is sunk into.
Yeah, but we keep inventory. You know, Sue gets the inventory and cross-checks it. So,
So then Sue is not putting out the reports?
well, do you want him to go to the committee, the liquor committee?
Sure.
Okay.
Or the city council.
Okay. Well, I would start with the liquor committee with them and work my way up, so we could certainly do that, yeah. Yep, that's not a problem.
All right, good.
So that'll be once a month then, or how will that be?
Well, he's been doing them every other month, so, and I guess when this was first brought up by Smith Schaefer and subsequently by Clifton Larson, it was 6 times a year. So they could be done every month, but I don't think that there's a need to do them every month. The audits, the inventories that have been done have not shown anything out of the ordinary as far as, you know, there's always some small discrepancies that might come up, but anytime you deal with an on-off sale, you have all the different moving parts, but there have not been any issues that have been found in these inventories. So we could do them every month, but the practice has been, and this was based on audit, what the auditors recommended was every 2 months, and I wouldn't recommend you to change that right now. I don't think there's a reason to.
Oh, that's reasonable, every
So-
2 months. But I mean, actually get a physical copy of what's going on.
Okay, we could certainly do that. Yep. It's not a problem.
I'm just curious, when a bottle is taken off the shelf and put out for on sale, does that get scanned out too, just as though it were sold across the counter?
Yes, it should be accounted for. When it goes from off sale to on sale, it has to be booked,
Yeah,
that it went to that other side, or however you want to
I
describe
don't know
it.
that I've seen that being done, but then I haven't been watching for it either.
Yeah, so when they take that bottle off the shelf for the on-sale side, there's a process to go in, you have to adjust it down. On the off-sale side, you adjust it down and then that moves it into the on-sale side. And we did come, I don't remember if it was January 2nd, we actually do come and observe inventory as well, right at year end. So when we came this year, we didn't have any, I think we had one real minor discrepancy, and it was just it was a breakdown of some bottles that come as a 24 pack, but they get broken down and sold in 6 packs. So it doesn't affect total cost or anything like that, it was just we could see one was over by 4 and one was under by 1 case, but it netted to a 0 change.
You're okay with the 2-month spot checks?
Yep.
That's good,
As
okay.
long as we're not seeing anything,
Yep.
that we find concerning when we come into year end and observe inventory, we didn't see all kinds of discrepancies in our accounts or anything like that, so that means, to me, that's telling me those periodic counts are working.
Everyone's questions answered, or are we ready to move on to engineering?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Please.
So we go to engineering then. First item is EDA business park update specific to the plat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council. There is nothing in your packet regarding this specific item. So between Derek and I, we'll make a verbal report on this item. Just for a little context, if you remember, not that long ago, we were authorized by the EDA and City Council to actually proceed with the preliminary and final platting for the EDA property. And we had to follow the code for all the requirements. We're able to compress some of the scheduling issues because the city is the property owner. So we can perform the preliminary platting and the final platting concurrently. But because we've got that other issue of the utility extensions we've got to make to the sites coming out from the north, we're doing what we're calling a general development plan for that part of the improvement. So we've got to do that general development plan and then do the platting, and then those platting documents will come to the EDA and the City Council for review. So I'll let Derek give you a update on some of the specific activities with regards to those GDP and
Sure. So, yeah, Joe mentioned, just going through that general development plan process right now. So, real quick recap, in this past week, we met with some of the property owners that own land to the north of the EDA property, just to get a general feel for what are their future plans. This is just an initial conversation with them. We've got to do some work or some looking into for access points that could be approved by MnDOT and the county off into the future, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks we can meet with those property owners to the north again, at which point we could wrap up the general development plan and then move into the actual platting. So that's kind of just a real quick recap on where we're at with that. We're right in the middle of it right now, so putting together a bunch of information, but yeah, that's what's going on.
and nothing too out of the ordinary or unexpected found at this point. It's just
Yep.
through the process.
No, yep, we've got some good information from those property owners. It's gonna take another discussion with them to fully understand how they might be using their properties to the north and how that's gonna impact the layout for the EDA property. But that'll all come out in the report once we're done with that, which is still collecting information at this point.
Short and sweet.
Yeah. More information to come.
Well, then we go to item B, the Second Street sanitary sewer improvement.
In this one, there is a memo in your packet regarding the update on this project. And Derek had actually put together that update. He's been working with the contractor on this, so I'll let Derek provide the update on the current status of the Second Street sewer lining project.
So I believe it was the last meeting when this project was awarded, if I remember correctly. So since that time, we've sent contract documents over to the contractor. We have not received them back yet. I basically heard that it's on their project manager's desk and it just got forwarded back on to us. But you might remember one of the things that was brought up with that was some assurance that that work would not be done during the Rose Fest days. So after hearing that, we put together a quick change order and sent that with the contract document package. I talked with the contractor, he's given me a verbal that that's fine, there's nothing to be concerned about, but he'll sign off on the change order, which assures that he'll get that done, and that will be part of the contract. So basically, that change order says no work between, August 15th through 19th. There's also some details on there. We don't want a bunch of equipment in the site as well. That type of thing. It'll be a clean site during the Rose Fest period.
And it's a $0 change order, so no impact on the project price.
Or schedule for completion dates, that type of thing. So the only other update that he had, he's currently planning on starting the project in late July. Once they do start work, it'll happen pretty quickly. So I'm not concerned that we won't be able to have it for the most part completed by that Rose Fest date at this point. But we'll get into a little bit more detail with the schedule as we get a little bit closer and have a pre-construction meeting with the contractor. So the only other item on the Second Street sewer project was just going to be a meeting with property owners, business owners within that project area before the project actually starts. So I'd like to find a time in sometime in the month of June to have that meeting. And that could be some type of open house style meeting where you just tell them about the project what's life gonna be like during construction and answer any questions that they might have.
And will be included on that, the council, or not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's pretty much the update.
And we've talked, we may do it too, we may prepare a little like, handout that, because it's unlikely that we'll get everybody to attend the open house, so maybe a handout too that then we can just, deliver all the properties, so even those that don't come to the open house will still get
It's
the
not such a big area, shouldn't
No.
be a problem.
No, and talk about their access, obviously is gonna be affected when we got the road closed down for the construction, and then there are a couple of businesses who are actually gonna have their pipes, the service pipes redone, so just
Right.
make sure they understand the, the constraints that they're gonna face with those elements. The more you communicate up front, the more they understand it, the more smoothly things are likely to go.
And another part of that discussion too is giving them good contact information. So we're gonna have a person that's out on site while the work is being completed. The secondary duty of that person that's out on site is they can be a contact for those property owners that you guys, so city staff doesn't have to be inundated with calls coming in. Just one thing that can help out with the process a little bit.
Okay, so item C then is Red Wing Avenue. We've got a resolution there ordering preparation of feasibility report on improvements to Red Wing Avenue. Do we have any further comments to make at this time?
Yes, I'll let Derek give an update on where the actual study is schedule-wise and information-wise. But just a little background on the resolution is, you already passed a resolution to authorize us to perform the feasibility report. And the resolution said Red Wing Avenue from 2nd Street down to 10th Street. Well, in looking and doing the investigation, we've identified that there's a couple of other small segments that connect into Red Wing Avenue that would benefit by being studied with the same project. And they're shown in the figure that's at the bottom of the memo, the two spots there in yellow. There's an alley that runs just from Red Wing Avenue to the west, and then also 4th Street for a half block over to the west. And so, in the event that, as we finish the report, we identify assessments to properties on those segments of the project, we want to be sure that we've got the proper documentation in place so that we're compliant with the Chapter 429 process. And so since we're still very early on in this project, we've got the time and opportunity, we thought, it just made sense to bring an amended resolution. Actually, it's a new resolution that will supersede the other one. That will basically say, we're still doing the same report, it's going to cover Red Wing from 2nd to 10th, plus this half block, plus this half block. Just so we've got these covered from a legal Chapter 429 perspective.
And what caused these areas to be added?
Well, that I will let Derek answer in his update on the information that he's been discovering as he's been working on the details of the report.
Yeah. So these two areas were added after a recent meeting that we had between me and city staff, where we were talking about utility needs throughout the corridor and drainage needs throughout the corridor. So within 4th Street, right in here, there's been some drainage concerns, and I believe that the street condition is also pretty poor. So that was just one area since the start of the project. It's requested that that be added to the feasibility report. Another area, for that second area being the alley to the south of 2nd Street, added, and there's obviously drainage concerns in those areas that's been brought up in the past. There's also, when we're talking about other utilities, notice in that area there's a segment of 2-inch cast iron water main. It's obviously way undersized, and it's of the material type that you generally want to get rid of and replace with either PVC or ductile iron pipe. So that was the reasoning why those two areas were added, and like Joe said, the resolution is basically just to clean up the paperwork behind it and ensure that those areas are covered in the resolutions. Really, from the amount of time that it takes, putting this information into the feasibility report, it's a pretty minor add from the amount of time that it takes us to put together the feasibility report. So it didn't look like that was going to be a huge concern, so meeting our budget with that.
Just so I understand, that 4th Street, is that short street that just goes back to the alley?
Yes,
And
exactly, it's like a half block.
and then there was a problem with the storm drain back there too, wasn't there?
Yeah, there's existing storm sewer that's stubbed up along
It's
the,
on the wrong side of the street or something.
yeah, it's on the north side of the road, and right now there's a lot of water that washes down this alley, and then comes down and washes a bunch of grass onto the road. So ideally, if you could do some type of improvement there, if that were included with the project, that would be, putting a storm sewer inlet out there, and also doing something possibly to address some of the gravel washing, if there's some grading that we can do to prevent that happening. We'll have to look into that in a little bit more detail, as to exactly what it is that we do, but we've added it to the report so we can do that. Otherwise, we're obviously started on the feasibility report, looking at utilities, putting together the layouts. What we're going to be working on in this next couple of weeks here is actually drafting up the report. Before we bring it to you guys, we'll review that with staff, make any last minute corrections, and I'm hoping to have that ready for you guys to review during the June council meeting.
I'm having a hard time figuring out where that alley is. There's no alley that comes out. Oh, okay.
It's right, yeah, right behind
Right.
downtown.
Yeah, I got it now. As soon as I start to say it, then I realize what it was.
Sure.
That's where you've been cooking your carport, you know.
And the short half block of Fourth, that's the one that butts into the back end of the
Yeah.
property where the
Yeah.
Bus
church
drive.
school used to be, that
Yeah.
got torn down
Right.
about 5 years ago.
Mhm.
So like Derek said, we can add these couple pieces in for the same budget that we had provided for the feasibility report, so it just makes sense to make sure we've got the right resolution in place. In case, so if we do identify improvements and want to identify any assessments for those improvements, we've got the right legal paperwork in place.
One thing I didn't mention here, so one of the things that we had talked about during a previous meeting was this significant portion of the project that appears to be unplatted, and we don't have property information on it. We did get some plat maps that Wayne was able to find, so I think we do have enough information to at least put together the assessment goals at this point. However, with the information that we have in place here right now, we haven't found any evidence that says that the city actually has control over the right of way. So there'll be some discussion in that in the feasibility report, and we'll have to work with Scott on what the recommendations might be for moving forward with that. There's a number of options that you can move forward with if there isn't an actual platted right of way. However, I think right now we have enough information to move forward with that. There'll be some discussion on how to handle the right of way in the feasibility report.
Okay. We have a motion to approve resolution 2019-18.
So moved. And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item D, VFW parking lot.
Sometimes it's interesting the things you discover when you start looking into it, with regards to that right of way. And also with regards to the VFW drainage. VFW drainage, there is a memo in your packet, about 4 pages long. Got some photographs that illustrate some of the things we found out there. As you recall, at the last council meeting, council that had requested that we go out and take a look at this drainage. There was a concern because there was a sinkhole that was opening up within the VFW's parking lot. And there was questions about why that was happening, and also questions about was the city runoff from the alley contributing to that sinkhole. And I will let Derek walk through the findings from when he came out and did his site inspection of that property.
Sure. Yeah, I went out there a couple of weeks ago, and actually Doug came out with us, as well. So, what's up on the screen here right now is just a picture of that sinkhole. So here's the actual inlet structure. Below grade, there's a structure that's a couple of feet deep. It's an open void that comes into the bituminous pavement, but it's obviously opened up below the concrete as well, and this is basically right on the south side of the building. Could you flip to the next picture? So this is just a picture of the inside of the structure. So what are we looking at here with some potential issues? And I'll come back and kind of explain how this comes into my opinion of what's going on here. When I'm looking inside here, I'm seeing deteriorated concrete, and most of that concrete deterioration is happening at the joints between the blocks that put together the structure right up in here, and also there's openings where these pipe openings are located. So, if you want to flip to the last page, that's got that map, that'll probably be the easiest to walk through. So, what's going on right now? This parking lot drains from south to the north. That drainage structure that we were looking at in that previous image is located right here. So that's going on. What's going on with the drainage that's on site, on the private VFW property. In the public right of way or in the alley right of way, this alley drains from east to the west. It looks like that alley was originally designed as an inverted crown, as you would call it. So normally a road, on any normal street, it's a center crown where water comes from the center of the road, drains out towards the curb. It's an inverted crown, so it's basically the opposite of it. For whatever reason, around this location right up in here, that inverted crown is dropped down on one side and it can allow some drainage. I mean, anyone who's driven up there can see that water can easily pass from the alley onto the other side. So that's one thing that's going on. On the secondary note, we had looked at the drainage structure itself, and you can see some of the concrete deterioration on the inside of that structure. So if you scroll up just a little bit, so you can see this a little bit better. So what happens with these structures? This is common practice. This happens all the time with older storm sewer structures. Once they get a hole inside of them, what happens is water that's on the outside of the structure, the groundwater, can pass freely into the structure itself. So when that water is moving, it picks up fine soils very easily. So what happens initially is it's just a very fine, like clay and silt particles that get in there. Over time, that volume of soil that's displaced adds up to a bigger area. And when these openings get a little bit bigger, as that concrete deteriorates even more, then bigger particles are allowed. So you've got your sand-sized particles, and in some cases, maybe even a rock or two can get through there. So over time, collectively, that can add up to these voids that open up around structures. Once that void gets big enough, then you're looking at a scenario with what's going on right now, where you've got sinkholes in the pavement, and the pavement itself can actually fall in. So what's the actual cause of this? When I'm looking at this, I'm looking at this from a standpoint of, okay, let's separate the two variables, the two possibilities for why this could be happening. If we take the alley drainage that's getting from the public alley into the VFW drainage, or the VFW inlet, out of the equation, okay, then what are we left with? This water that's falling in here can't get in. We've still got a significant amount of drainage that can freely pass into this inlet. So really, the amount of water, as I'm seeing it doesn't really come into play. But if we address this structure issue with the integrity of the inside of the structure, if we take that variable and change it to now it's a new structure, now water can't get in to those open joints, then it's a different scenario. Then we're in a situation that would not cause this type of issue. So when we're looking at this from the standpoint of, okay, what's causing this? Is it the excess runoff from the alley, or is it the structure condition? The answer is it's the structure condition. That's what needs to be addressed. That's what will prevent this issue from happening into the future. So that's what I included in this memo as what's going on with this. So, moving forward, couple of different